owners of the WNBA, they look at these players like a joke. To be fair, why shouldn't they? These players are demanding 30% of league revenue prior to expenses being paid. The players that have never driven in viewership, the players that have never brought in attendance, the players that have never turned a profit, the players that wear pay us what you owe us t-shirts. Yeah, if I'm WNBA owners and I know the figures like the back of my hand and the players are going to come up to me and ask me for 30% of league revenue, I would say, yeah, I'm just going to laugh in your face. And that
The WNBA owners just looked these players dead in the eye and laughed right in their faces like they were telling the worst joke ever told in professional sports history. These are the same players demanding 30% of league revenue before a single expense gets paid. The same players who have never driven viewership numbers that matter. The same players who have never brought real attendance to arenas. The same players who have never turned a single dollar of profit for this league. The same players walking around in those pay us what you owe us t-shirts like the league actually owes them something beyond what they already get. If you are a WNBA owner and you know the financial figures like the back of your hand, and these players march up to you asking for 30% of league revenue, you would do exactly what they did. You would laugh right in their face and walk away without saying another word.
like the back of my hand, and the players are going to come up to me and ask me for 30% of league revenue, I would say, yeah, I'm just going to laugh in your face. And that seems to be what these WNBA owners are currently doing. It's been a month since they've received a proposal from the Players Association, and a month later, they still have not responded. Let's get right into it. Please like the video, let me know your thoughts in the comments section below, and subscribe to the channel. I would appreciate that so much. Alexa Filippo, shout out to Alexa Filippo, by the way. Alexa Filippo, Annie Costabile, I give them time to time, but they're on top of these things. As far as reporting,
WNBA owners reportedly met the union's completely outrageous demand for 30% of gross league revenue before any expenses, with nothing but pure derision and mockery. It has been a full month since the players sent their proposal, which was basically a shocking ultimatum that seemed to completely ignore the league's decades-long financial struggle and crisis. Insiders are claiming the owners did not even think the proposal was worthy of an actual response because they viewed it as identical to past equally unrealistic asks that went nowhere. This is not just tough negotiation tactics or hardball business strategy. This is a blatant dismissal that has left players completely humiliated and wondering if their demands are seen as nothing more than a bad joke told by people who do not understand basic economics. The silence from the league for weeks and weeks speaks massive volumes about the enormous chasm now separating the players from the people who actually hold the purse strings and control the money. The stage is now set for an unprecedented showdown that could destroy everything.
then you come back and say, hey, you want to go to dinner? It's totally not a date. Did I just tell you no? Oh, this is like the kid asking their parents, hey, can I get a toy? No. Hey, can I get a Lego? Wait, didn't I just say you can't get a toy? But since you're changing the words from toy to Lego, now you think I'm suddenly gonna say yes? They're just going to continue to ask and ask and ask until they say yes. This is what it seems to be. They're going to just nag and nag and nag and nag. Can I get a toy? No. Can I get a Lego? No. Can I get a Kinect? No. Can I get a Barbie? No. Fine, you can get the Nerf gun, just leave.
It has been an entire month since WNBA owners received the proposal from the Players Association, and a full 30 days later, they still have not sent back a single response. Alexa Filippo and Annie Costabile deserve credit because they stay on top of these stories and report the facts, even when nobody else wants to touch them. The reason for such a dismissive and disrespectful reaction from ownership runs incredibly deep into the financial history of this league. The WNBA for nearly 30 years has never turned a profit, which is a stark, brutal truth that many players seem to completely overlook or ignore. Decades of operating at massive losses, despite the league's absolute best efforts, form the ugly backdrop to these current negotiations that are going nowhere fast. Imagine being an owner, pouring millions and millions of dollars into a venture for 3 full decades, only to be hit with demands that would make the very problem you have been fighting to contain even worse than it already is. This financial reality, which gets swept under the rug constantly, is the foundation of the owner's stance and makes the players' uncompromising demands seem not just ambitious, but almost delusional to the people footing the bill.
The only way to find resolution is to find a compromise? And one player told ESPN, that's literally what a negotiation is. You don't say. You don't. And I want to know who that one player is, because I'm assuming that's one player that probably voted for the strike. Did that player not understand that it's the players who aren't doing the compromising? Does that player understand that it's the players who aren't doing the compromising? Every proposal we see, every offer we see from the owners seems to be more and more compromising. They seem to just give more and more money, and it's the players that say, no, but this 30%, we want this.
This is like a kid asking their parents if they can go out to dinner, and the parent says no, and then the kid comes back 5 minutes later asking if they want to grab food somewhere. Did the parent not just say no to going out? This is exactly like the kid asking for a toy and hearing no, and then coming back asking for a Lego, like changing the words suddenly makes the answer different. Wait, did the parent not just say you cannot get a toy? But now, since you're changing the words from toy to Lego, you think the answer magically becomes yes? The players are going to continue to ask and ask and ask and nag and nag and nag until somebody breaks down and says yes just to make it stop. Can I get a toy? No. Can I get a Lego? No. Can I get a K'NEX? No. Can I get a Barbie? No. And finally, the parent breaks and says, fine, you can get the Nerf gun, just leave me alone.
Decades of operating at a loss. Let me take a sip out of my coffee. Not years. Decades. We're going into the 30th season. Uno, dos, tres. Tres decades. Pardon my Spanish isn't tres décadas. I don't know. Of operating at a loss. How sad. You know what happens after losing money 3 decades in a row? You know what happens to companies? They fold. They go out of business. They stop reinventing the wheel. They run out of.
The WNBA has only survived this long thanks to its big brother, the NBA, acting like a parent, constantly bailing out a struggling child who cannot manage money. The NBA has consistently injected millions upon millions of dollars year after year to keep the WNBA afloat and breathing. This is not a sustainable business model by any definition, yet it has created an illusion of infinite resources for some players who think the money fountain never runs dry. The owner's laughter, then, is not just about disrespect or being mean. It is a desperate plea for the league to finally stand on its own 2 feet and become financially independent. This is a shift made completely impossible by the current demands being thrown at them. The lifeline from the NBA has ironically made it harder for the WNBA to achieve true financial independence and for players to actually grasp the precarious reality of the situation.
The arrival of Caitlin Clark has emboldened these ladies something fierce. The battery is in their back because they've had 2 years of respectable metrics. Viewership and attendance. Find a middle ground on housing. Quote, housing remains a priority for all, housing for all players remains a priority, especially for those on non-guaranteed contracts and international players. One player told ESPN, but I think this is one of the toughest issues for the league for whatever reason. Now we compare this to others. The NFL, NBA, NHL, MLS, and MLB.
One player told ESPN that the only way to find resolution is to find a compromise, and that is literally what a negotiation is supposed to be. You do not say. I want to know who that one player is, because I am assuming that is one player who probably voted for the strike without understanding what they were voting for. Did that player not understand that it is the players who are not doing the compromising here? Does that player not understand that it is the players refusing to budge on anything? Every single proposal we see from the owners seems to be more and more compromising than the last one. They seem to give more and more money with each offer, and it is the players that say no. But this, 30%, we want this no matter what.
The NBA is still willing to offer housing for players that quote, don't have high salaries and or are in expensive markets. So the players that can afford their own house, you guys got to buy your own house. For the players that get paid a pretty penny, you got to spend that pretty penny on your own house. For the players that can't, we got you. For the players that coming in for a relief contract, we got you. But all you earners out there, sorry, you gotta pay for it. Welcome to the real world. Lean into the winds. Much of the Players Association.
The core of this complete humiliation stems from the players' absolutely unwavering demand for 30% of gross revenue, which is revenue before expenses. Owners who have watched the league bleed money for years and years are proposing 70% of net revenue after expenses are paid, which is completely different. This is not a minor disagreement over small details. This is a fundamental clash over how value is calculated and shared between ownership and labor. The players, emboldened by recent viewership spikes brought mostly by one person, are asserting their worth through a figure that owners believe would guarantee continued losses and sabotage any chance of future profitability. The chasm between these two percentages represents the absolute breakdown of mutual understanding and respect. Decades of operating at a loss, not years, but decades, going into the 30th season. You know what happens after losing money 3 decades in a row. Companies fold, they go out of business, they stop reinventing the wheel, they run out of options and money.
It was before there was a massive break of trust between the league and its players. It was before people watched this stuff. When you can lie to the 46,000 old fans and tell them things are much more hunky-dory than they really are. I guarantee you, if people were paying attention, like people, not drones, like people that actually think for themselves, we're actually watching this and we're following this deal as it goes. People, not shills that get paid to support, people that can think for themselves. They would say, wait, the WNBA, they're getting fleeced in this deal here. Wait, forget that. Why is the NBA still?
This is where Caitlin Clark enters the picture, creating a truly shocking ripple effect that nobody saw coming. Her meteoric rise and the unprecedented attention she has brought to women's basketball have, according to sources, emboldened these ladies something fierce, like nothing ever before. After just 2 years of respectable metrics driven almost entirely by Clark, many players now feel they hold immense leverage, like batteries in their back pushing them forward. This newfound confidence, however, is perceived by owners as dangerously misplaced and disconnected from reality, leading to demands that ignore the league's deep-seated financial woes. The superstar's arrival, meant to uplift the entire sport, has inadvertently fueled a negotiation stalemate, leaving Clark potentially shocked by the fallout. The arrival of Caitlin Clark has emboldened these ladies something fierce, with batteries in their back, because they have had 2 years of respectable metrics, viewership, and attendance. Housing remains a priority for all players, especially for those on non-guaranteed contracts and international players, one player told ESPN, but I think this is one of the toughest issues for the league for whatever reason. The owner's frustration is not just about the money being demanded. It is about a perceived lack of compromise from the players' side, which refuses to move an inch. Sources reveal that the union keeps submitting essentially the same proposal over and over, refusing to budge on their core demands like a broken record. This stubbornness is exactly like a child repeatedly asking for a toy after being told no, just rephrasing the request in different words. Owners feel they are making offers that are more and more compromising, giving more and more money, only to be met with a resounding no and the insistence on that 30% gross revenue figure. This repetitive cycle has pushed negotiations to a complete standstill, breeding resentment on both sides. The NBA is still willing to offer housing for players that do not have high salaries or are in inexpensive markets. So the players that can afford their own house, you have to buy your own house with your own money. For the players that get paid a pretty penny, you have to spend that pretty penny on your own house. For the players that cannot afford it, we have your back. For the players that are making millions, you are on your own. Welcome to the real world. This targeted approach aims to support those most in need, while simultaneously pushing back against the idea that the league should fund luxury for its best-paid athletes who can afford their own places. It is a strategic move to address a genuine need without capitulating to blanket demands that would drain an already struggling budget. The Players Association has adopted an insulting narrative, declaring the league's proposals so far from adequate as to be insulting to their value. While this is a common union tactic in disputes, sources outside the union suggest it is counterproductive for the WNBA specifically. Unlike the NBA or NFL, which generate billions and billions in revenue, the WNBA operates at a negative profit, losing money every single year. Such aggressive rhetoric might be effective in wealthy leagues, but for one dependent on external funding, it risks alienating potential allies and public support. It paints a picture of ingratitude, further diminishing sympathy for the player's position when the financial reality is so dire and obvious. The owners, in turn, have communicated their absolute priorities, not just to increase player compensation, but to fundamentally shift from decades of operating at a loss to achieving sustained profitability. This transition is critical to incentivize owners to continue investing in the league instead of pulling their money out. The current player demands for 30% of gross revenue before expenses are seen as directly undermining this existential goal. Without a path to profitability, owners have little reason to pour in more money, threatening the very future of the WNBA as a viable business. Regardless of Caitlin Clark's impact, the financial sustainability question is paramount for the league. The league and players are now trapped in a period called status quo since the January 9th deadline passed without agreement. This means the conditions of the 2020 deal remain in effect, but the stalemate continues, stretching into its third week without resolution or progress.
This holding pattern is costing valuable time as the 2026 season kickoff looms just over 100 days away. The clock is ticking not just on the CBA, but on crucial preparations like the two-team expansion draft for the Portland Fire and Toronto signing over 100 unrestricted free agents and drafting the 2026 rookies. Every single day without an agreement pushes the league closer to chaos. This impasse is also highlighting a massive break of trust between the league and its players, which is a stark contrast to the harmonious agreement celebrated in 2020. Back then, Commissioner Kathy Engelbert and then Union President Nneka Ogwumike announced an 8-year CBA on Good Morning America, touting a groundbreaking agreement. But that was before COVID-19. Before player activism during the bubble season, and crucially before the explosion of women's basketball popularity driven by Caitlin Clark. The changed landscape has shattered that old trust, replacing collaboration with deep suspicion and open conflict. The public fallout of this broken trust was vividly demonstrated when Nneka Ogwumike, during her 2025 exit interview, put Commissioner Engelbert on blast. This direct public criticism from a prominent player against the league's top official signals just how fractured the relationship has become. It is no longer a private negotiation. The discontent is spilling into the public arena, further complicating any efforts to find common ground. Such open hostility makes it incredibly difficult to rebuild the bridge of trust necessary for a compromise, leaving both sides digging in deeper. Despite the union's insistence on their proposals being insulting, there are whispers from external sources that the Players Association might benefit from talking more optimistically about the wins it appears to have had, even before the deal is done. This suggests there have been concessions from the league side, but the union's narrative focuses solely on what they have not achieved. By highlighting these early wins, they could potentially shift public perception and create a more positive atmosphere for negotiation, rather than constantly fueling the narrative of owners laughing them out of the room. The owner's position on revenue sharing is unlikely to significantly yield, despite some wiggle room at the cost of other expenses. This hardline stance on the core financial structure underscores their commitment to the league's long-term viability over immediate player demands. The players' argument that their demands represent our value and is not too much, despite decades of losses, is a critical point of friction. It highlights a fundamental difference in perception. Players see their on-court talent and growing popularity as direct revenue drivers, while owners see the financial statements that show consistent red ink. This disconnect prevents any true mutual understanding on revenue sharing, as both sides are operating from entirely different realities of the league's financial health. It is a classic case of subjective value clashing with objective numbers. The approaching May 8th deadline for the 2026 season tip-off is not just a date on a calendar, it is a terrifying ticking clock. Beyond the CBA, the league must conduct a two-team expansion draft, sign over 100 unrestricted free agents, and draft the incoming rookies. All these critical logistical pieces are intertwined with the CBA. Without a deal, the entire preseason timeline faces unprecedented disruption, potentially harming player careers and the league's operational integrity. The pressure is immense, and the longer the stalemate, the more dire the consequences for everyone involved. This whole situation boils down to a fundamental misunderstanding of compromise. One player, quoted by ESPN, stated that a negotiation is about compromise, apparently oblivious to the fact that in the owner's eyes, it is the players who are refusing to compromise. Every owner offer seemingly adds more money, yet players continue to demand their 30% gross revenue without budging. The silence from the owners after a month without a formal response to the union's proposal is a deliberate, calculated move. It is a power play, signaling that the current demands are so far off base that they do not even warrant serious consideration. This tactic aims to force the players back to the drawing board, demanding a more realistic proposal that acknowledges the WNBA's financial realities. The humiliation is not just in the rejection, it is in the outright dismissal, the implication that the players haven't even brought a serious offer to the table. Ultimately, the WNBA stands at a critical juncture, with players emboldened by Caitlin Clark's popularity, making demands that could sink an already struggling league. Owners, desperate for profitability after decades of losses, are responding with dismissive laughter and outright refusal, leaving players feeling humiliated and disrespected. And this is not just a negotiation, it is a battle for the WNBA's very soul, where perceived value clashes with stark financial reality, and a superstar's impact, meant to be a boon, has instead ignited a dangerous firestorm that threatens the entire future of the league.